Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a returning guest. It's her second time on the show. She's an author, and she's all the way from the United States. Her name is Margaret Mary O'Connor. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Oh, thank you, Christian. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, so it's a pleasure to have you back on. I was immediately intrigued. I mean, I was already really intrigued when I had you on the show for the first time because of what you're trying to do as far as like being progressive in the church, and B, just in general. I always respect people that are, kind of on a mission of sorts and trying to invoke change in the world in a positive way. And that's ultimately what your first book was about, and we covered that in the previous episode. So go check that out for anyone who hasn't listened. But this upcoming book that you've got coming out, I just wanted to dive straight into this. It's called Journey of a Celiac Soul. And okay, I always end up doing research on any guest that I have, but I had to really go into a lot of research for this just to kind of, okay, I know how this will sound, but I was trying to understand almost why you wanted to come on the show. Obviously I know you want to promote your book, right? That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. But I was like, what's this about? What? I was like, okay, so it's a food related thing. And I was like, that's cool. What is it? Cooking book? I don't know. And then I just really had to go into it. And then once I started doing the research on it, it started clicking. And I was like, okay, I get where we're going with this. But I'm going to give a little bit of an intro before I ask you a question, just because I want to kind of give people an idea, at least some background as to what you're trying to achieve with this book, and also the importance of the ceremony. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, Eucharist is the Christian ceremony based on Jesus Christ's last meal with his disciples. It refers to the mass or gathering of people in celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, his sacrifice, and general worship. Holy Communion is the part of the Eucharist in which Christian followers receive the host and the cup, which is supposed to represent symbols of Jesus Christ's Last Supper, where he shared bread with his disciples. Eucharist comes from the Greek word Eucharista, meaning gratefulness, and Eucharist in Greek also means giving thanks or thanksgiving. So I just wanted to kind of tie all that together. Now, how does this relate to being celiac, you might ask? Well, I would like Margaret to tell in her own words how that relates to what we're talking about. Now, obviously, as I've laid out there is a ceremony. This is a very common ceremony. Holy Communion, the Eucharist, happens quite regularly in church, in Christian church. But it intrigued me as to the key point that you were saying in your book, which is that, there's a refusal to acknowledge this for certain people. So certain people are being excluded. So in your own words, what can you tell us about this book? What are you trying to achieve with this book?
Okay, what I'm trying to do is really explain my own journey as a Catholic with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease, and my near-death demise, and as well my own access to Eucharist. That's the issue. The Eucharist, the host, contains wheat. And when I was first diagnosed back in 1986, there was just one host, the wheaten host. Then about 18 years later, they came out with a low gluten host. But the issue is for myself and other Catholics who are extremely sensitive to gluten, as we have issues after eating that host. And so many more Catholics don't have that issue. They've maybe been diagnosed sooner, I went 20 years. There's a lot of people who have gone 25, 30 years undiagnosed. So we had more damage done, to our, getting in the nitty gritty, the intestinal area. And anyway, we just can't, that host just will not agree with our physical body. So obviously, you're not going to take in something that's going to be affecting your health. And what do I mean by health? Because this whole issue of celiac disease I'm living with an autoimmune disease, and yet people think of it as some type of a fad diet. And I think what the main problem is, when you hear the word diet, what comes to mind? Right away, you think of weight loss. But if you have celiac disease, you have a medical disease that literally has caused starvation in your body. So right now, there's no medicine or pills that we can take to stop us from having issues with wheaten food. So we're on a gluten-free diet, but that diet's there to keep on our weight so we don't lose weight. But it's very hard. Like I went 20 years undiagnosed and literally sick every day. And then you have people seeing this as some type of a fad diet. That's only the physical aspect of it. But even within the church years ago, people were making ludicrous remarks like, well, maybe we should change the flavor of the host. Maybe or we should be serving croissants. And I mean, and I know, it can be comical, but when you're living 20 years of hell, literally, but I'm trying to bring, that's where the issue is, that the host, according to church law, has to be made with so much wheat in it. So the gluten, that's the protein in wheat, that's the whole issue.
Right.
I don't know if that makes it easier.
No. I mean, okay, I wanted you to say it in your own words, because I always believe in that whenever anyone comes on the show. I think it's always better to have it in their own words. And as I say, I did some research beforehand, and I think probably the best follow-up question I could come at with you is, okay, I mean, you touched on the key thing there as well, is that it's prepared especially by, I guess, someone working within the church, as opposed to just any old bread. Like, I don't know, my naive mind, because I'm not a religious person, I don't know how these things work. So I just kind of naively thought, oh, they just bring in whatever bread, bless it, whatever. But you're saying, okay, it's being made by people associated with the church. Okay, great. But that kind of speaks even more to kind of the question of, why is there this ignorance? Why is it that you're kind of, were stumbling my words here. Why is it an issue? That why can't
I think it's because there's so many more Catholics that they have celiac disease, and their body, they can take in that low gluten host and not have any physical effects to that.
Okay.
And that's the issue. So we're like in the minority, but we're like a forgotten minority. And unless I can find a priest, which I had for several years, that was very open-minded, and he would let me put, it's called the pyx. It's a little metal container, and you can put your host in there. Like if you're bringing communion to the sick people, like in the hospitals or hospice, to carry the communion around. He let me put my pyx on the altar, and I would put gluten-free food in there. So then there was no issues of contamination, because it was separate. It was setting in the pyx. It wasn't on the plate where the other Eucharist, the hosts are, for distribution. But I had that, oh my God, several years. Then I had several other priests that were very accommodating that way until 2 years ago. And we had a new associate pastor came in, and he went along with this for about 5 months. And it was about 2 weeks before Christmas. I'll never forget this. And he said, Peg, I want to talk to you. I said, all right, what do you want, Father? And he said, we have to talk outside. And this is in December. I said, what, outside? Yes. So as soon as we go outside, he says, Peg, I no longer can give you your host, your gluten-free host.
Okay.
Well, of course, I was like, well, what? I said, who's doing this? I said, is the chancery behind this? Because I've been picketing against pre-sexual abuse. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
And he just looked at me and he says, I don't know you. And I said, what? And then he raised his voice. I don't know you. I said, look at Father, you've only been giving me this communion for the last 5-6 months. So I said, Father, we're going to end this right now before I say something. So I had to go back into church, basically, get my picks off of the altar. And I mean, I was livid inside, to say the least. So I called and I got to talk to him the following Tuesday. And I said, look at Father, let's cut right to the chase. I said, just tell me who is telling you that you can no longer give me my communion. And there were still all these pauses. And I said, this is my spiritual life, and you're no longer going to help me? Now you're going to tell me right now. And then finally, well, it was me. And I said, well, why would you ever do something like that? And he said, well, my conscience. And I said, what? He said, yes, I am breaking church law, giving you that gluten-free communion host. Well, then, of course, I was more livid. So I said, wait a minute, let me understand this. You're going to let me swinging out here in the wind, and your conscience is fine and dandy so you can get a good night's sleep, but I'm not going to be able to receive communion? And now you have to remember, I'm talking to him over the phone. His comment back to me was, well, Peg, I'm so glad you understand. And I just hung up the phone. I mean, I still don't understand it. This is a man that wants to be some type of a perfect priest, and yet he is not. He's following man-made law. All these laws, all these laws that are called canon law, they're man-made law. And when you go back into our church and you think of what did Jesus do? He was healing people left and right. So their health was of importance to him. And here this man, this so-called man of God, is going to prevent me from receiving my Eucharist because he is breaking not Jesus's law, but he's breaking man-made law. So it's very sickening. It's unbelievable. It's disheartening. So basically, for the last 2 years now, I haven't been able to receive communion. And then I knew this even gave me more incentive to write this book. No, not revenge, but really no, to get out the particulars of this issue. So then I thought, well, there are some other open-minded priests, but I thought, no, I don't want to get them in trouble. So I'm not going to even broach this issue with them.
If I had to take a guess, I would say, I mean, I know how this is going to sound, but I'll frame it in this way. This is like a quote unquote political move, which sounds stupid when you're talking about politics, but there's plenty of politics in history, in the church, in religion, and there has been for hundreds of years, and there continues to be. Because the one thing we always seem to forget is that, people are people. People are selfish. People make up their own stuff as they go along. Look, I'm not a religious person. I'm a very open-minded person. I'd probably describe myself as being like very spiritual. I'm very open-minded. I kind of pick and choose what I like, what I don't like from all religions. Like not just spirituality but all religions. I think they all have value. And I've met a lot of religious people over the years. I've met people that are, really open-minded, brilliant, I agree with. I've met other people that I clash with. And my ethos has always kind of been, just believe what you want and just don't hurt people. And then that's fine. You know what I mean? I don't think it really matters. But when I hear stuff like this, and it's funny because I had a conversation with my housemate just before I came on to do this podcast today. And we were talking about religion. And I said, if there is a God, I don't think that God would care at all if you have your communion or Eucharist and it's gluten-free, or if you go to church on a Sunday or you don't. Like, I think God cares about the following things. Are you a good person? When you make mistakes, do you own them and learn from them and move on? Are you generous of your heart and soul and mind? Are you thankful for what you have?
Mm-hmm.
Do you overcome things? Yeah, those are the kind of things I think. If indeed religion is genuine and stuff, I think those are the things people should be focusing on, not whether or not the bread is gluten-free or not. Which leads me on to the more pressing issue here: is that it is a political move. I think it's more logical that, look, in the church, you are a controversial figure. Like your last book was controversial. This book is, I think it's controversial from the perspective of you're trying to change something that doesn't want to be changed. I.e., this institution, the Catholic Church, has been around for hundreds of years. They're very reluctant to change. Not everywhere. As you said, there are some very open-minded people who, they're open to things. They're like, yeah, sure, that's no problem. And then there's other people that are like, no, it has to be done like this. It's always been done like this. So maybe they were just stubborn people. But I think in this instance, this is someone who knows of your works, knows what you're trying to do, and disagrees with it. But rather than having the guts to just say that, they make up some nonsense about, oh, yeah, no, we can't give that to you because, it just doesn't work. Because look, when I delve into this, when I did the research for this, and I just sat and I thought about it for a second, I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, okay, if we strip away all agendas for a second and we just look at the facts, what you're literally asking is, hey, when we do this Eucharist, could you just prepare some other bread as well that's gluten-free? And it'd be like, yeah, sure. If you've got like a baker that you've hired for this, I don't know how this works, but let's assume that's the way. Is it really that taxing to just make some bread that's gluten-free, make some bread that has gluten in it? Is it that taxing? I just, do you know what I mean? I look at it from a basic perspective and go, is that such a big deal? And to hear that you've had
it's the law aspect. That's the whole stickler. It's the law aspect.
See, and, I just see that as gaslighting. That's just them trying to tell you something that just is nonsense.
And I thought, I'll be the devil's advocate, when my pyx was on the altar with whatever priest was there, at the consecration, even though they're presiding in Jesus's presence, it's Jesus himself that's changing that form, that material, into his own body, into the Eucharist. So it's either going to be changed by Jesus or it isn't going to be changed by Jesus. So what's the issue? I know.
It's I go back to my previous point. I honestly think people in the church are either fearful of you, intimidated, or they worry by being associated with you, there's like there's going to be this issue. Which, look, I mean, you're just pushing. Your last book was about pushing for equality. That for women, something in the church. Which, look, in general, in life, there should just be equality. There just should be, because that's just right. And if it's not equal, it's not right. And with this, in a way, it's kind of saying the same thing. It's still about equality. It's like, well, why is this stubbornness there? Why does it have to be done this way? If it was just a normal person that just didn't have agendas and was just trying to be a good priest or whatever, they'd just be like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries. So next time I do make the orders, I'll make sure there's gluten-free bread, or I don't know, I'll go down the supermarket and get some and bless it, or I don't know. Just, is it really such a big deal to do that? But I think it's because you're trying to invoke change, and some people don't like that. Some people fear change. Some people are desperately trying to grasp control of something. Maybe it's something like that.
And I'm caught in the middle of it all.
Yeah. But I mean, as long as you're fighting the good fight and pushing this, I mean, actually, I will ask one last question on this. Is there kind of like a general response? Because obviously this is a local level. So this is your local pastor or something, right? That's refusing this. But have you looked at it from a higher level? Is there like an official, I don't know, ruling on this? Is this an issue elsewhere?
Well, it's actually the official ruling. It's all taken care of through canon law, that host has to have so much weight to it. So then when they finally came up about 18 years later with the low gluten host, they figured, well, then this issue is taken care of. And of course, it wasn't completely taken care of, even though our numbers are smaller than so many other Catholics with celiac disease that can, the low gluten host, they don't have issues with. So again, it's just like we're a forgotten part of that, but yet that's a very source of our spiritual life is our Eucharist.
Have you spoken to other people with celiac disease in the church, and if so, what are kind of their thoughts and opinions? What do their battles look like? What are they being told?
Well, the same thing. There was a group of us ladies that all were having the same problems, and the only denominator was we all had gone several years, so many years being undiagnosed. And I think that's why that's the crux of the problem. But and there's so many of them now, they've all died off.
Oh, bless.
So I'm like the lone wolf.
You're a rock star. We're proud of you. I remember when the last episode of the podcast dropped. I think everyone was really enamored with you, because I've got a lot of female listeners in my community and in the podcast community and such. And I think they really just kind of generally respected your sort of commitment to this and just pushing for equality and stuff in something that, again, I still struggle to understand why it's such a big deal, because life changes, things change. And if you have an institution like a religion that inevitably is tied with history and is constantly rewritten, we know this as a fact. Things like the Bible has been rewritten several times over and changed for agendas and such. But something like having female ministers and such, as you indicated in in our conversation, over history, it went from there was just male and female ministers and priests, etc., to them trying to kind of go double back on that, move backwards in time and take away women's rights and such. And these days, I remember this stuff hitting the news in the UK. It was like a big newsworthy thing that there was beginning to be female bishops and ministers. I think this was in the 2000s. And I remembered even back then thinking like, I don't get why it's okay. I should really choose my words very carefully here. So I don't get why it's a big deal for the church to just, pick people based on their skill and intellect, and therefore, not consider gender in that, just purely pick people like, has this person worked hard enough? Do they have the skills necessary to do this? And that inevitably has nothing to do with gender, and it never should do. It's to me, it's the same as going for a job. And I'm sorry to put it in those terms, but it's true. If you're going for a job, it should always be who's the best person for the job. But ironically,
that would be common sense. And unfortunately, obviously, we still are looked upon as not being equal. So then, well, I even consider that, that person for that position. So the black and white of it is, and I know in the last show, in case there's, listeners that didn't hear it, back in 1976, the Pope has his own commission, the Pontifical Biblical Commission, and they emphatically came out and said, there's absolutely no biblical reason why women can't be ordained. So here we are, always trying to explain why we're not women priests, and going back in the history. When you think of it, this issue is really over with because what the church just said, there's no biblical reason. But of course, then the whole obstacle is getting them to actually move and make that change.
Yeah. And just going back to my my job interview example, I think there's another link there which applies here as well, which is that, and and look, this isn't me trying to be cynical. I've just learned this over the course of going for jobs over the years. They are not looking for the most talented person or the most educated person. They are looking for someone they can mold, someone who is one of them, fits in the culture. And that is exactly what is the case with the church. It's like, does this person, to quote a phrase, are they singing from the same hymn sheet? Are they the type of person that, will go along with the things that we want? And this is why I brought in that point about politics earlier. There's definitely politics in the church. There's definitely, you have those committee meetings and stuff and how to run the church, because there's money in the church. Obviously it's given through donations and such.
Definitely, but there's money.
Yeah, and it's in some ways it's run like a business. In other ways, it's, I think, sometimes run selfishly. I remember, I'm just remembering this now, but I had a friend years ago who I used to work in a bar job with. We both worked in this hotel and blah blah blah, and he took a pay decrease. He worked in the church. He had a job in the church for years, and I think he was like a sort of cushy office job and stuff, but it was about a good 10 years. And here's the thing, not only did he leave that job, but he also renounced his faith. Like, that's how much of a bad experience he'd had. And the whole thing was predicated on the fact that people within that particular church were very kind of selfish, and they were very two-faced is probably the word I would use, and just would do things that are not morally justifiable, and we've seen this over the years. I've seen this. I've met people over the years that I look at them and I say, yeah, you might be quoting from the Bible, you might be quoting, saying, oh, this is how things have to be, but your behavior is not just. Like, here's a really good example. There's a show that's just come out on Netflix. It's called Midnight Mass. And it, basically, to cut a long story short, it's like a supernatural horror series about a group of people on an island. But from a religious standpoint, it's quite I guess it's a little bit old fashioned, but they're all very religious, and that's the thing that binds them together. And the point that I wanted to raise with this is there's a particular person who works for the church in this series. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, so people will probably remember what I'm talking about here. But basically, this woman, she's supposed to be, your perfect disciple of the church. She helps out everywhere. She's fully committed to the church, committed to the priest. Ticks all the boxes. But she's an awful human being. She's a human. She gets jealous. She does horrible things. She bullies people, but she's the best Christian in this particular church. And this is kind of what my friend was experiencing in the place that he was at. And I think this is sometimes what pushes people away. And the key is always in who are the particular people running your church. Are they good people, or are they not good people? And that's what we're really looking at. You know what I mean? Because it always comes back to that. Whatever, religion is religion. Whatever you believe is what you believe. But know that any church you go in, and this applies to all religions, know that whatever you're following, whatever church, whatever wherever you go to do what you need to do, just remember that place is run by people, and you don't have to go along with what those particular people are saying or what they're telling you to do. You are a human being with thoughts and feelings of your own, and you should stick to that first and foremost. And also just look at okay, what they're saying, does that correspond with, if it's the Bible, is there a disconnect there? Because I think that's a good question to ask yourself sometimes. It's one of the reasons why I'm not religious. I go back and forth on my own personal beliefs, but I definitely believe that when it comes to having a belief in religion and stuff like that, things like who people can be in relationships with, or money, or all these kind of things should not be in the conversation as far as telling people what they can and can't do. You know what I mean? I think it should always be about giving people a good template for how to live their life in a positive way for their own benefit and for the benefit of others. And then also kind of helping people navigate, and especially when they're at a difficult time in their life. That's why obviously classically people that are dealing with alcoholism, AA, there's classically the program has a religious element to it, because it's trying to give people some purpose in their life. And in the few times that I have been in churches over the years, and I have heard a minister or a priest speak, what they're always doing is telling stories, but trying to give an overall message. Okay, this is the message for this particular sermon. This is the thing to remember. They're trying to encourage you to study, to look into what to delve deeper, really. And that's all good and positive. And I think it's just about navigating this and trying to avoid the toxic, negative people that sometimes end up in the church, and just find the ones that aren't like that, And of course, questioning things such as how you've done in both of your books, because, there's no reason that women can't be in high positions in the church, and there's no reason that you can't, be able to celebrate this particular ceremony that you want to celebrate. And not have access to this gluten-free bread. That's of course something that should be done, and I don't see how you could argue otherwise. So yeah. But that moves me on to my next question, which is, what kind of progress have you made since your last appearance on my show, but also in terms of just spreading the message of your previous book, which is called Scandal in the Shadows? Talk to us a little bit about the developments since then.
Well, unfortunately, there have been no developments. It's very sad that Catholics, and again, I'm not trying to bash my fellow laity members, but they're just so quiet. They don't want to come out. And again, there's so many, the main issue I think really is there's so many Catholics still, women here across the country, don't understand this truth that there were women priests in our Catholic Church, that Mary, Mother of God, was a woman priest. And until they understand that fact, then and only then are they going to start, within their own conscience, examining, well, gee, if that's really true, why wasn't I told? Why have I been lied to? Why has my trust been betrayed? And until that happens, we're not going to there won't be a grassroots effort to, demand accountability from the hierarchy. And again, here, who's this heretic? It was funny, I was on John Cross's Hard to Believe podcast, and he came out with this argument against women being priests. And he
Oh,
said,
wow.
In the Catholic Church, well, no, it wasn't him personally, but he was just bringing it up
Oh,
in a
okay.
discussion. Yeah, I don't want to put,
Put him on blast right now.
No. But anyway, he said that the church, goes by obviously certain laws and precedents, and you, as a good Catholic, should follow them. So it's not that women, because of your womanhood, that you are not a priest. It's because you are not following the church laws. And of course, he said, what would you say to that? So I said, well, and then he laughed. He said, well, first of all, I said, their precepts are faulty to begin with. And I gave the 5 reasons that the church will always attribute why women can't be priests. And they will say that they are emphatically biblical in nature. And yet new biblical research is showing that all of those different concepts are all cultural prejudice behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's convenient for them. They have those 5 main points as being biblical. And yet now we know, they know, but they will not openly come out and make some type of a pronouncement, we're sorry, but these aren't biblical. But I mean, how realistically, they're not going to say that unless they're in some way held accountable.
Let's talk about you being labeled as a heretic for a second. Have you kind of received any pushback, either from, I don't know, the church in the States or the Church of England, or maybe in Italy, the Vatican? Have you actually received any messages kind of saying, oh, well, what are you trying to do here? We disagree with what you're saying. Have you received any pushback at all?
No, and I'm very surprised. I've just been under the radar.
Well, that's going to change. No, I respect what you're doing. I remember when I was, I'm gonna be honest. I'm always a little bit nervous when I talk to someone who's religious. Not because I'm worried, but because depending on who you're talking to and how open-minded the person is, that can kind of dictate how the conversation goes. I can see, when I'm speaking to you, you're just an open-minded human being, and you just want to change things in a positive way so that you and other people similar to you can live a better life and enjoy their faith and get the most out of it. That's basically, in a nutshell, what you're trying to achieve. And I fully respect that. I think that, in all walks of life, that's a positive thing. I'm a massive supporter of women's rights. I always will be, because why wouldn't you be? And
Thank you.
yeah, well, just come on, like it's ridiculous in this day and age that we've got to this point, and that accounts for so many other things, things, race issues, like I always just look, we're all the same, we're all born into different circumstances. We have different things to contend with. Things like privilege do exist in society. We can say that they don't, but they do. And we've got to work together to try and eliminate those things as best we can. Like you notice on my show, I have people from all walks of life, all races, religions, you name it. And I've had to think about this as well, like the type of people that I'm happy to have on the show. And I always look back at this. I'm like, as long as you're not spreading anything that's kind of hateful, I'm prepared to have you on the show. But I'm very, it's because when I had a guest on very early on. I think it was like the third episode. And she'd said something, and she was religious, but she was a born again Christian. And she'd said something, and I won't repeat it, and I've kept it in the podcast because it kind of hit me off guard, but it was her belief. It wasn't, I didn't support it. And she didn't say it in a hateful way either. It was weird. She'd said what she'd said, but it was in a kind of, this is what I believe, and I'm going to explain why I believe this. And I felt like I should say something, I should allow that to happen, because I don't really believe in censorship. But some people had said to me, you should have challenged that. Maybe you should have debated her. And it made me think a bit more about my position on this podcast and what I'm trying to do and who I have on the show. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned, is to always kind of focus on the intent of people. Are they trying to ultimately put something positive into the world? Because that's what I'm trying to do. And I look at what you're trying to do, and I think it's positive. You're trying to benefit people's lives and help other people in the church have a better experience. And I think that can only be a good thing. Let's move it forward. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and why?
I think the best piece of advice I've ever been given is it's something which you even said before, is that not maybe exactly, but it's your own conscience, your own heart, and that you approach a subject or a topic that way, or if you're going to give advice that way, and just try to be open-minded when you do it, and don't automatically just look at someone or something and, obviously label them in such a way that, they're not going to understand this, or they're whatever. So that's basically my approach. Again, it's something very simple, but hopefully it's very heartfelt, that, you're conversing with someone and you're not judging them in some crazy way.
I agree. I think it's important that we don't judge people. Like this brings to mind something that I heard someone say recently. So I do volunteering every week. I've done so since October 2020. So like right when the pandemic was in its midst. I thought I'd go do it. I've always wanted to do volunteering, and I love it. I really adore it. And the CEO, basically they do like a little morning meeting every time, like when you're sitting waiting to do the day. And the CEO will just go over things like, this is what's happening, this is how the day is going to go, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, I'm half awake, I'm like, listening, but, whatever. And the PPE is going to be this, make sure you wear your masks, blah, 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 But then, because we're a charity that helps like the homeless and the destitute and people in poor income families and such, they always press on, you have to focus on giving people dignity. When people are at their lowest, moments in their life. They could be having the worst day possible. You know, you got to be there. You got to show kindness. And it's weird sometimes when I think about having to remind other human beings to be kind, having to remind people to be nice. It seems crazy, of course, but that's the thing. We're not all that way inclined. I remember many years ago, I felt like life owed me something. I felt angry. I was like, why do I not have this, but everyone else has this? But of course, true happiness and kindness has to come from within. You have to have a good relationship with yourself in order to have a good relationship with the world. But I remember this CEO was talking, and then, you know, sometimes every once in a while you hear someone say something and it just hits you. You know, they could be just having a general conversation and they say one thing and you're like, wow, yeah. She's talking about, she says, when people come in today, just remember this. They might come in and, you know, they might look terrible. They might, you know, be homeless and haggard and or whatever. But try to remember to look into their eyes. See their soul. Don't see everything else. Just see their soul. See the human that you're dealing with.
Wow.
And show that person the compassion that you would want. And I just sat there thinking about that. Yeah, it hits you. It's, you know, because that's what it is. It's we should help each other. We should be there for each other. Like, it was really cold here in Manchester a couple of days ago, freezing, maybe -5. I think there would just been there'd just been like a snowstorm, and then the next day it was freezing. And we have a lot of homeless people here in Manchester. It's a pretty big problem. And I saw a guy, it's early in the morning, it's like a Sunday, 9 a.m. I see this guy, he's been sleeping rough. He was at the top of these stairs to this particularly nice building. Managed to find himself shelter. He's got the cardboard down. So he's got like a base, because for those who don't know, if you sleep on a cold, hard floor and there's, you could die. You could, because you lose all your body heat. So the reason that you sometimes, so the reason people put down the cardboard is to keep the heat in their bodies and not lose that and not die. So that's why that happens. So anyway, he's sitting there, he's laying down, he's just woken up, I think. He's rolling a cigarette and he's, you know, whatever, we're going to begin the day. And I just see that and I think about how so damn cold it is on that particular day. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. And
and when you think of the piece of cardboard, it's so thin probably. I mean, the cold's going to go through that.
And I was on my way to get a coffee, and I just went and I grabbed us both a coffee, and then I came back and I just went to give him the coffee and, you know, see how he was doing, sort of reminded him to get somewhere warm and such. And he was just so, obviously he was really thankful and happy, and, you know, you could tell it like made his morning. But there was just something about hearing his voice. He was just saying, thank you so much, and, you know, bless you, hope everything's going well. And it just really kind of humbled me. I guess I just sat there thinking, or walked away thinking about, like, yeah, we're all in this together, you know. Fundamentally, we're all just human beings trying to make the best of our situations and the best of our lives. And we should make a conscious effort to try and help each other. There's a reason why. Go out on the streets. Go. Here's a suggestion for all of you. Go out and go up to a homeless person and go ask them for like a spare pound or something, or for help with something, because I guarantee you they will help you. But I've met many people with tons of money, or who are in a very good position, who would never help anyone because they're so selfish. But the people that are at the lowest points in their life truly know the value of things and appreciate them and are grateful. And that's something we should all have. We should all be grateful for what we have, work hard to get more, the best we can get out of life, and always just help each other as much as we can. And not, as you said, not have judgment, not go into a conversation and judge someone. Because, you know, another thing as well, just to wrap this up with a bow, none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all go, you know, let our emotions cloud our judgment. You know, we do things we're not proud of. We just have to own them and be the best that we can be in a given moment. Yeah, and I saw this recently. Try to give everyone the best version of you. You know, no matter what you're going through, how difficult times are, just try to give people the best version of you, because I guarantee they're going through worse things than you or whatever, and they could probably really use that boost, you know. And I know I get comments sometimes after my live streams and podcasts, and people reach out to me and say, hey, you know, I was going through a hard time and this really helped. And it spurs me to keep going, to keep trying, to keep just, you know, providing entertainment, whatever. And if that makes people smile and that helps people get through a hard time, then I know I've done something right. So, yeah.
And I just don't know how people like that day in and out can be outside like that all day practically. You know, and just surviving the elements alone. And then for him to, you know, be so gracious to you.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, you think he would be so miserable. I mean, you know.
I think it's just, you know what it is? It's kindness. And look, I know it sounds like, oh, he's telling that story to make himself sound like a great person. Like, no, what I try to do is I try to make it a big part of my life of helping people, because one thing I've noticed about life is that it continually throws you opportunities, not just to get things, but also to help people. And you've always got a choice. And if you genuinely just don't have the time, don't have the means, whatever, no worries. There's no need to feel bad about that. But if you can help someone, either with your time or with your money or emotional support or something, generally, I think it's the best thing to do is to help that person. Because you never know how much that will mean to that person. And also, you could change their life with that. You know, it's something as small as just being there for someone for 10 minutes to help them get through something, or giving someone a $5, or I don't know, like something as small as that can begin a chain of events that can completely transform.
Yeah, it could be like a sea change, because no one has really stopped before to, you know, like you said, to how are you, you know.
Yeah, no, even that can be a big thing. You know, people talk a lot about the mental health of people dealing with homelessness and such. Yeah, that there's a lot of mental health problems that people are going through, and a lot of that can be things like depression and loneliness, and people don't think about that. Like, it's good to just have conversations with people. And yeah, you sometimes see like pictures of like Keanu Reeves from back in the day when he's just sitting on a sidewalk somewhere in America having a beer with a homeless guy and just chatting and stuff. And people, here's the thing, people are like, oh wow, that's amazing, look at him, like Keanu Reeves, this big Hollywood actor, having a beer with this guy. And it's like, you know, it's not really amazing, it's just normal. It's just Keanu Reeves hasn't forgotten that he's just a normal human being, just like the rest of us. And that's what it always comes down to. You know, nothing that you do in life makes you better than any other human being. Because we're all the same. And to be honest, the things that I look out for, the things that impress me, is the kindness of people, their generosity. That's what impresses me. I don't care how much money you have, what title you have, like none of that stuff will ever impress me. But if you go out of your way for other people, and you're generous with your time and your experience and your money and everything,
then you're a real person.
Yeah, that's something to be respected and applauded, I think. And gosh, I could ask you questions all day, but I do have a couple of interesting questions that I've sort of created recently. sort of as generic questions, but also to kind of get people thinking a little bit more, and you know, because I like trying to get people, tap into people's knowledge. If you could travel back in time and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
It would be not to worry so much about what other people think of you. And I know you've probably heard that a million times, but it's the truth.
Simple and effective. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Right now, no other books are in the progress, but again, for those listening, we have a wonderful, if you're Catholic, we have a wonderful church. And for those Catholics, Vatican II even says you can speak out. You're not going to get in trouble. Come on, let's wake up. Let's see the reality. This priest shortage is going to be affecting your access to communion. And you have an answer within your own church history of woman priest. The Vatican has said women can become ordained. Let's make it happen. And that means everyone. Can you imagine, Christian, if everyone listening to this podcast would send a postcard to Rome and just ask them, you said there's no biblical reason why women can't be ordained. Well, then why aren't you doing something about it? No. Seriously. And for those listening also, if you go to my website, yourradicaltruth.com, yourradicaltruth.com, you can look over my blogs, and there is a petition there for Mother Mary. We don't want to forget her. We don't want to forget how the church took her title away as Mary Priest back in 1927. So we have a lot of work to do, but let's get at it.
Well, hopefully this podcast helps in that efforts. Again, for the second time, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I wish you all the best with both books and all your future endeavors. And yeah, just thank you very much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Christian. Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you too.
Okay.
And to all my listeners and viewers, thank you again for listening. Be safe, be well, and I shall see you in the next one.